The family of a 5-year-old Canadian girl is taking the federal government to court for not bringing her back to Canada or repatriating her from a Syrian refugee camp. Amira's parents and siblings were killed in the anti-ISIS air campaign. She's currently living in the Al-Hawl camp, a facility in northeast Syria run by the Kurds. Her family says they've been trying to get her back to Canada for the last year. Her uncle claims the regional government will allow her to leave if the Canadian government facilitates her repatriation. The family also claims the feds have refused to do so and alleges that that is a violation of Amira's rights as a Canadian citizen. For more on all of this, we've reached the family's lawyer, Lawrence Greenspan. He joins us here in Ottawa. Hi, Mr. Greenspan. Good to see you.
Hello, thank you.
Let's start off with where I left off in the introduction there. The feds say that they can't repatriate Canadian citizens in Amira's situation in Syria because they have no diplomatic presence there or really the means to do so. And that has really been exacerbated since the pandemic. Your response to that?
Well, my short response would be something in the neighborhood of hogwash, because there's only been 22 other countries, well-known countries, the United States, Great Britain, France, Germany, who have managed during the course of the pandemic to repatriate their citizens. There are also a number of other countries that have repatriated their citizens, in some cases by the hundreds, from Syria, despite the fact that none of these countries have consular relations with the autonomous administration that is governing the area. So the 2 points that Mr. Trudeau and the Canadian government seem to keep coming back to are, number one, we don't have consular relations. That hasn't stopped more than 20 countries from doing the right thing as far as their citizens are concerned. And the second point raised by the government is that it's not safe to do so. In terms of the safety, Amira's uncle was able, without any diplomatic or government assistance, without any additional security, without any safety measures being put into place, he was able to travel to northeastern Syria, visit his niece in the Al-Hawl camp, and then meet with the foreign minister, Dr. Omar, who basically told him, look, all you have to do is have your country make an official request for repatriation and then send a delegate, and we will gladly hand over Amira, as we have done with these 20 other countries. So, unfortunately, Canada has not been prepared to do any of those things in order to bring this 5-year-old orphan home.
Let me get you to expand on that, because we got a statement just before we went to air from the Foreign Affairs Minister, François-Philippe Champagne's office, in which they pointed out that first part that I said to you. They said, though, also that Global Affairs Canada officials are in regular contact with the child's family, and Minister Champagne has spoken to them directly. Has the minister provided any assurances? I mean, in the statement they say, despite the challenges that they've cited, Global Affairs is evaluating options to assist further in this case as we continue to advocate for the child's health and safety. Have they been more specific with you about those efforts?
Well, they have for more than a year been offering promises and assurances about how they're interested and they're concerned about Amira's safety and her health. And there's no doubt that they've made inquiries about it. But they've also been advised by their contacts in their region that an official request for her repatriation must be made by the Canadian government, and that a representative, a delegate, even somebody from a third-party country or a third-party humanitarian organization needs to come there and take her back to Canada, and that's all that needs to be done. And as far as checking up on her, the Canadian government has been very good at that. They've been checking up on her, as far as we know, regularly. Isn't that wonderful? Instead of checking up on her, why don't you take the minimal steps that need to be taken in order to bring her home? And that's why the application has been made to the federal court, because Global Affairs Canada has been dawdling along on this for more than a year, while the life and safety of a 5-year-old Canadian orphan is swinging in the wind.
Yeah, that's, I guess, what I wanted to get at with you. What was the moment that the family decided this was something that they had to pursue through the courts? If, in fact, that the Minister of Foreign Affairs is providing those assurances, is speaking directly with them, was it just that it was taking too long?
Well, what assurances has the minister provided? He's assured us that the Canadian government is looking into and checking up regularly on the health and safety of Amira. Those are the only assurance that Global Affairs has been offering for the last year. What required this matter to be brought to the courts is the fact that the Canadian government has refused. Ask the minister, ask Global Affairs, will you make an official request for her repatriation? And if you get a straight answer out of them, it'll be no, we haven't and we won't.
In more general terms, we have asked the government and the Prime Minister himself even about the other kids who are not in the exact same position, but are certainly detained in Syria, in places maintained by or operated by the Kurds. I believe the latest human rights group's assessment was that there are 26 of them. Could the government be apprehensive about moving on Amira's case because of the precedent it might set, or because of the, could that, I guess, help explain some of their hesitancy?
I don't think that if the Canadian government is hesitant to repatriate Amira because they're hesitant or concerned that they might also have to repatriate the other 25 children that are being detained in Syria, I don't see that as a valid excuse for not moving on Amira. Do you? I can't imagine any Canadian citizen would say, well, geez, we can't ask for Amira to be repatriated because you know what might happen? We might get another 25 Canadian children brought back to Canada as well. I mean, that's the whole point of this, is what these children are just that. They're children. They have rights under the international covenants. They have rights under the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. And these rights are being disrespected completely by the government's inaction. And the fact that they say that they're concerned and we're looking into it and we're checking up on their health and safety and all of this, that's very nice. That's very Canadian. But do what the other 22 countries have done, which is bring your citizens home.
I understand that argument 100%. I also know there's a political aspect to all of this, right? These are kids associated with parents who went over there to fight with ISIS. Is that the case in this specific incident? I know what you mean. I see you shrugging. I know the argument. We've had many people on the show make it around these people are Canadian citizens, and especially the children. There are many humanitarian concerns around that. But there are a lot of people that I hear from who don't want the government to do anything because it involves people who went over there to fight with ISIS. What would you say in response to that? And what can you tell us about this case specifically with respect to that?
If you take the situation at its highest, people of Canada, Amira's parents were ISIS sympathizers or whatever their association was with ISIS. Quite frankly, I don't care. How are you going to say to a 4-year-old orphan, now 5 years old, how are you going to say that she should be punished? She should be detained in a tent city of 60 to 70,000 other detainees because her parents were associated with ISIS. It's just, the average Canadian isn't asking for that to happen. And nor are any thinking politician would look at this and say, wait a second, they're kids. She's 5 years old now. So what are we going to do? We're going to let her rot in a detention camp in northeastern Syria because we think or we believe, or even if we have evidence that her parents were associated with ISIS? I don't think that as a population, the people of Canada are so vengeful as that. I just don't believe it.
What can you tell us, Mr. Greenspan, about her living conditions? You mentioned there a bit about how many people are at that camp and basically what the families, I mean, I can only imagine what their concerns are given the place in the world that she's in right now. But what can you tell us about basically the conditions she faces right now?
Human Rights Watch came out with a report a couple of weeks ago in which they summarized the situation on the ground. Amira's uncle saw that situation earlier this year. He went over there. It's clear that there is rampant overcrowding, that's unhygienic. There is a lack of clean water. Amira has asthma. If there is going to be, if there is an outbreak of COVID in that detention camp of Al-Hawl, many lives are going to be lost. And to detain her in that in that situation without any good reason. And that's really what we're talking about here. If the safety is not an issue, as demonstrated by all the other countries that are repatriating, and if the absence of consular services is also a non-reason and really an excuse, if you take away those reasons, there is no reason, no good reason why we can't repatriate Amira. And that's why we had to go to court to basically say to the government, look, you got to do what you got to do. And what you've got to do is respect the rights of this child internationally and under the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, and you got to bring her home.
Okay, I'll leave it there. I'm out of time. Thank you, Mr. Greenspan. Really appreciate your time this evening. Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.